to our July. Welcome we're starting the meeting. Welcome. This is the July meeting on total personal income forecast. This is the first meeting on the agenda. Are there any communications with the council, Dr. Bebars?
Yeah, we have not received any, and we invite the public to use the chat function to share any they might have right now.
Yeah. And then if you can also raise your hand if you're going to be commenting.
Oh,
I
yeah,
see Jenna.
I see Miss Villalobos. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Gina, you seem to be in the attendees, but you're using the public webinar link. You must have received a separate email that tells you that you would be a panelist. It's a different email.
And it doesn't come from the state. It comes from the Zoom, right?
It comes from Zoom, so it's kind of like it's an email that comes from Zoom. So I would check the spam folder as well, just in case.
It should have
I
been
can
sent
drop
this
it in the.
morning. Yeah. Okay.
I'll mail it to you, Gina.
Okay.
Okay.
If you could use that. Oh. Okay, I'll send that.
Okay, I guess when
Okay, I just forwarded so you should be able to log on with that, Gina. Okay.
Okay, so I see no communications from the public. So there's no communications from the public. Okay, the next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from the last general fund meeting in May. So any discussion on the minutes from May? Okay, anyone who want to move to approve the minutes?
I'll move to approve.
I'll second.
Okay. No one want to have further discussion? Okay, so we'll take a vote on approving the minutes from the May general fund meeting. Vice Chair Maynard?
Hi.
Dr. Bonham?
Aye.
Councilmember Hayashi?
Aye.
Councilmember Hamasu?
Aye.
Okay, so the minutes are approved unanimously, 5-0 for the minutes from the May general fund meeting. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, next item on the agenda. Okay, Gina, welcome. It's showing you as Carl Bonham.
It does show
just
me
so you know.
Carl Bonham.
Yes.
We'll correct that.
Yeah.
It's just everybody has their own personalized link. That's why you're using
Look, there are
Carl's.
worse names you could be called.
I just
Okay, here we
All worse.
Good to meet you all. I'm Jenna. I found out I was joining you yesterday afternoon, so I watched your video, so I feel like I know you all. I watched some of your videos last night, so I work with Outrigger, and I've been in the visitor industry for over 20 years. And I serve as the Chief Revenue Officer here for this company. So.
Welcome.
Welcome,
Jenna. And it's great to have someone from the hospitality tourism industry.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
So the next item on the agenda is Dr. Bebars' presentation on the total personal income forecast. And he's been doing the personal income forecast for quite a few years, even when Dr. Colby, his predecessor, was the chief.
Right.
So he's very familiar with it. And he's done a couple training sessions for us. And Bebars, you want to say anything about the personal income forecast to give us some background of it? I've been affiliated with this council for almost over 20 years in one capacity or another, but I know the general fund, what it is, a lot more. I'm much more familiar with general fund than I'm personal income.
Right, right. Yeah, so this meeting is only I mean it kind of affects the spending ceiling, the growth. So we never hit that ceiling, so it has not been an issue necessarily, but it is still part of the kuleana of the Council on Revenues to forecast the calendar year for the next calendar years, two next calendar years, total personal income. And yeah, I have given a training, as you know, and we can share those slides and the training video again if you like. What I'm going to be talking about today is just summarize what happened last year and what was the forecast by the council. So the council's forecast, so in the two meetings, right, in July and then we meet again in October, the forecast was 4.9, kind of in line with the models, which was on the average 4.96. Now the preliminary numbers in June for 25 came at 7%. And from what I can understand is BEA, Bureau of Economic Analysis, is the agency, federal agency that releases these numbers and collects these numbers. They have in the fourth quarter of 2025, they have taken into account the settlement paid to households related to the 2023 Maui wildfires. And Carl might have some comments about that, and I think Yuhiro has their own approach about this. But that was the reason why we might have been a little off. That it's a higher number in the fourth quarter than expected, and the council met in the third quarter in October, and so that's part of the reason why the actual numbers might be higher according to this. And again, these numbers are subject to revision. So typically we have the revised numbers by September. So BEA revises their own number and all of those are subject to change. But apart from that, the models had become a bit more optimistic in the October meeting, forecasting about 5.7%, and then the actual came at 7%, predominantly because of the current transfer receipts. So there's this other current transfer receipts, any insurance settlement money and payments of that sort that is not for that will be part of the current transfer receipts section of the total personal income. Now, in terms of what's happening today is the current council forecast from back in October stands at 4% for calendar year 2026. The models that we ran come at 4.27%, about 4.3% for calendar 26, and 5% for calendar year 2027. We also have a summary of the other agencies, DBET and UHERO, and then for the general fund meeting that we have for the council in May, all the members actually give their own forecasts for in a fiscal year format. So we take the average of fiscal year 26 and 27 to get the calendar year 26 number. So these are based on the ones that are highlighted here, 4.96 and 4.7 is an average of all the members' own forecasts when they submit their economic indicator forecasts for the general fund meeting. And then the DBET forecast is from their June 15 quarterly state economic review publication. And then UHERO has its official forecast from May 15 that is a bit more optimistic for calendar year 26 at 5.2%. And finally, when we take the average of all four of these, which is the models that we run for council, the council's own members' average forecast from general fund meeting, the DBET forecast, and the UHERO forecast, the average of those four comes at around 4.6% for calendar year 26 and 27. I'm happy to answer any questions, but I I wanted to keep it really brief, since this is more of a macroeconomic topic, and it's as the tax department, we usually do not have too much to say about it.
Papers, how
Thank
would you describe the personal income? What are we trying to estimate? In terms of how would you describe it to a person, a non-economist person?
I'll have Carlos
Uh-huh.
answer that.
So can I, let me share my screen and
Please.
I'll walk you through some of the data and why the 2025 number came out as strong as it did. So you should be able to see a screen with a chart with 4 lines on it. The dark blue line is total personal income. And the other lines are the components of total personal income. So the green line is labor earnings. So this is all of the wages and salaries that are paid to households, to workers, not households, but to workers in the state of Hawaii. And so you look at the number, we're talking about 75,545,000,000 was total labor earnings in the first quarter of 2026. So that makes up the bulk, and total personal income was 109 billion. So the vast majority of this is what people earn at work. Now that also includes their fringe, right? So it's not all wages, it would include benefits as well. And so this is the BEA trying to estimate how much people are being compensated for their work. And then the purple line, I hope no one's colorblind, but let's say the middle line, the purple one, is dividends. That's actually dividends, interest, and rent. And so that's basically earnings off the assets that people have, including property. That was 23,563,000,000 in the first quarter of the year. And you'll notice it's relatively smooth, right? The labor earnings is the green line, it's relatively smooth. And then the gold line is transfer payments. Okay, so the bulk of that would normally be Social Security benefits, but other transfer payments as well. And that could be transfer payments from governments, right? It could be federal government, so Social Security benefits. It could be things like SNAP benefits or other kinds of transfers to households from government, but also from businesses. And so if you go back, we were talking earlier about how we missed the income forecast during the pandemic. Well, that's because and actually I remember we were trying to estimate how big these spikes in transfer payments were going to be when the federal government threw all this money at households, and we badly underestimated it. We were wrong, and so our income forecasts were too low. And you can see the spike in the headline, the total personal income, that's caused by the spike in transfer payments. That's also what happened in the fourth quarter of last year. So transfer payments in the third quarter of last year were 19,420,000. In the fourth quarter of last year, they were 28,220,000. All these numbers are reported annualized. So these are quarterly numbers, but they're reported at an annual rate. And so what we, after reviewing what was going on with the court decisions around the Maui wildfire settlement, what we decided, and the BEA described this as well in some of their reports, when the legal issues were resolved, there was a disputes over whether the insurance companies would be able to basically get back some of what they had already paid out to households when the settlement was finished. Could they? I can't remember the legal term for it. Subrogation, I think, was the issue.
Subrogation, correct.
Yeah, and so could they essentially get access to some of the money from the settlement fund to recoup some of their losses. When that was decided by the judge, then that made the settlement, I guess, legally binding. And when that happened, the BEA counted some of the settlement. Now, by our reckoning, they only counted a portion of it. It looks to us like they counted the commitment that HECO had made, and I think HECO maybe had already made some payments into the fund, and that's how it ended up getting counted. But in our analysis, we came to the conclusion that none of this money has been paid out to households. And so when we did our forecast, if you remember from BIBAR's presentation, our forecast for 2026 was higher than DBED's and higher than the council's. And that's because we took the transfer payments out of 2025 and we put it into 2026 and 2027. In other words, we're trying to forecast the actual economic activity rather than the BEA accounting system. So our numbers aren't going to match. That's how we ended up with a much higher forecast for 2026, because the money will actually start to flow to households in 2026 by our assessment. So the number for all of 2025, I think, was 7% growth. And, if this was the end of it, then 2026 would be weak, right? It would be coming down off of a very high level. I don't think it's the end of it, even the way the BEA will account for it, right? There should be more money coming from KS, from the county, from the state, that will show up in another spike in transfer payments, presumably in 2026, but it may be later. I can't tell you exactly how the BEA will report this.
Oh,
So having said all that, I'll answer questions in a minute. I actually like the sort of consensus numbers that BIBAR's got when he averaged everything up. I thought that was a pretty reasonable forecast.
So Carl,
Well-
I'm sorry. You can go ahead, Vice Chair.
Well, I was going to ask Carl, thank you. With the spike that, it throws off all the percentages, right? When you have this big, what is it, $9 billion spike. What percentage of the annual number is that? That's huge.
Yeah, it's 10% roughly.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
It's 9 billion. The 9 billion jump in, now remember, these are annualized, but and the annual total personal income is around 110 billion, and we saw a $9 billion spike in the fourth quarter. So yeah, it's kind of crazy.
so if we're forecasting based on a percentage, I would assume that means we've got to assume that 9 billion is now reoccurring, though you're saying we could have some reoccurrence. We don't know.
Well, I'm reasonably certain it will. We will see a reoccurrence. It won't be. I don't think it'll be as big as this one. The HECO share of the $4 billion settlement was, I think, 1.9 billion. And yeah, so we may very well see another 2 billion in 2026 or in 2026 and 2027. 2 billion annualized is 8 billion, right? So I'm not really clear exactly how the BEA ended up with that 9 billion jump in the fourth quarter. They don't provide enough detail for you to know exactly what they did.
Carl, where does the business owner's profits go into the TPI? Is it in the workers' compensation you mentioned?
No, a business owners. So that would show up in owners. I can't think of the name for it, but there is. So for individual privately held businesses,
Proprietors.
Thank you, proprietors' income. And yeah, I don't have that on that chart.
Okay.
It's
But
relatively
it goes, it's a relatively small percentage, you're saying?
Yeah. And I mean, you could pull it up on the BEA website.
8.5%. 8.5% of all TPI is proprietor's income.
And it includes also like if you have multiple owners, it goes in that category. Because a lot of businesses have multiple owners.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know exactly how the BEA would account for that, but I mean, in principle, remember, this is an aggregate number, right? And so they're gathering information from tax records and from labor market data and coming up with these estimates from a whole variety of different source information, with the bulk of it being tax information.
I mean, so if you look at the press, like Civil Beat is saying the settlement money began dispersing in June 26. So it's something more recent. So I'm not sure. So it does seem like it would continue
so
this year.
that's the payouts. Okay.
Mm.
And so what we decided was that the BEA counted this when it became sort of legally binding,
I see.
instead of the cash flow of when the payouts actually went to households. It struck me as very, very odd. And I tried to read their manual of methods, but I quickly ran out of steam on that. Yeah, nobody got $9 billion worth of transfer payments on, and this all shows up in Maui income, right? So it shows up at state level, but it doesn't show up in the other counties. So if I had shown you transfer payments by counties, you would only see it on Maui. Maybe a tiny little bit, but imperceptible on the other islands. And actually, we don't even have income data for the counties yet for 2025. So.
So looking at the core TPI workbook, and you can really see it in the fourth quarter of 2025. We went from 107, which was kind of stable for the first 3 quarters, and then it went up to 117 in quarter 4,
Yeah.
and then down to 110 in the first quarter of 2026. So you see that one-time spike may or may not happen again.
Yeah, that's the 8 billion Carl was talking about, that drop.
Yeah. So just as, because we usually do a percentage, right? The math becomes more difficult when you've got these weird spikes that come in and out of the calculations.
Well, the easiest thing to do is to assume that it will reoccur in 2026, or and what we did was we actually took the whole settlement and spread it out over 3 or 4 years, because it's going to take, and we netted out the $1 billion of legal fees that are going to come out of it. And I don't think the BEA is doing that. But if our goal is to actually forecast the official statistic, I'm pretty, should never say you're confident when you're forecasting, but I'm reasonably confident that we will see another transfer payment spike in 2026. Now watch, it'll show up in the first quarter of 2027.
You'll be wrong again, Carl.
Yeah, it's just part of the job.
Okay. Does anyone have any further questions of Carl or Baybars? Because the next item on the agenda would be to discuss the TPI for 2026.
So Carl, just to confirm, right? It's the 8 billion is an annualized number, right?
Correct.
Because the total settlement was 4 billion, but then if 2 billion comes in, then you're annualizing it over 4 quarters, so that's why we get the 8, right? Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which in and of itself kind of raises a question about what. If you annualize it, you're basically treating it as if it's ongoing, right? And it's not. At least not in perpetuity. I mean, you're not going to get the same jump every quarter of the year.
Okay. So we're now moving to discuss total personal income for 2026. So anyone want to?
I had a question. So you're saying
Yeah.
that out of the $4 billion settlement, we have $2 billion left, and that could be another $8 billion spike in 2026 or 27.
That's my interpretation of what's going on. Yeah. And I don't know what the trigger will be for the BEA to, I mean, my understanding is that PECO's already paid into the fund. And I know the state has set aside, well, I'm pretty confident the state has set aside its $800 million contribution. And, you know, maybe the trigger for the next transfer payment spike is when either KS or the state or the county actually transfers the money into the fund. And I don't know what would prevent that from happening in, during 2026. All very sort of unsatisfactory information. And
So anyone has any thoughts about 2026 TPI percentage, growth percentage? I mean, Bebar's laid out the models for us and the average. So it seems like the average of all the models is what, 4.66?
Correct. 4.61 and 4.6%.
So if we get that transfer payment, we would mirror what happened in 2025 and get another 7%?
It's possible, yeah. Well, no, it would be 7% if 2025 hadn't jumped, right? If we got another transfer, so suppose we got another 2 billion in the fourth quarter of 2026, then the growth rate for 2026 would just be sort of the normal growth that you would expect, 4.5%. I mean, there are other reasons why income ought to grow more strongly in 2026 with the higher inflation, with overall prices rising. And there's also reasons for income not to grow because there's no job growth. So yeah, if we get another spike in the transfer payments, then we can ignore it from a growth perspective for 2026. We wouldn't be able to ignore it in 2027 then.
Right. So looking at the quarterly actual numbers, the average for 2025 turned out to be 109.9, which is the same as the first quarter of 2026. So if we are kind of stable at that number and get another hike, as Carl was saying, it would be close to that 4.5%.
And if you look at the growth rates before the fourth quarter, right? So TPI growth was 5% year to date through the third quarter of the year. And I mean, that's not that different than I would expect a little bit slower growth in 2026 because of the lack of job growth. And so if we get another spike, that's why I think the 4.6, 4.7 seems pretty reasonable. That would be a little bit lower than pre-settlement spike in 2025. And it would rely on us getting another settlement to sort of smooth out the 2 years. So to break the roadblock, I'll make a motion of 4.6 for calendar year 2026.
I'll second that.
Anyone want to discuss it further? Okay, we'll take a vote. Vice Chair Maynard,
Aye.
Dr. Bonham,
Aye.
Councilmember Hayashi,
Aye.
Councilmember Hamasu,
Aye.
Councilmember Villalobos.
Abstain since I'm
Okay,
so new.
okay. Okay, so the vote will pass 5-4, the 4.6 growth rate with one abstention. Okay, the next item on the agenda is the personal income forecast for calendar year 2027. Carl, you want to start the discussion?
Yeah, I'm working on it right now. So let's see. Well, I got started and then I messed up my formula. I think if you can do the math and figure out, well, what if the underlying economic growth was say 4.5, 4 point, we'll pick your number, and then take into account the fact that, we're sort of assuming that in 2026, we're going to get another spike, but in 2027, we won't, right? And I think I messed up my formula, but I ended up with a growth rate of like 2 or 2.5% for 2027.
It kind of makes
I'll
sense.
try it.
Yeah,
I'll try it again.
Yeah, you're taking out about 2%, right?
So if I take out 8 billion out of what happens if we grew at 4.5% for the next 2 years, I get 111 billion. And we would be at,
We'd have a negative number.
so that we'd have a negative number. Because by the end of 2026, we would be at 114 billion approximately. Double check that, -8. Yeah, we'd be seeing a drop from hopefully I'm not introducing any wild errors here. Yeah, I get 2.5% drop.
It's quite a bit different from the model, the equations and the models.
Well, the model doesn't know about the transfer payments.
Okay, but we have three more parties that are going to pay into the fund, right? The state, city, and Kamehameha schools.
By our calculation, the HECO portion was roughly half of the total settlement. And so what I was doing in these calculations was assuming we'd get the second half in 2026.
Mhm.
And we don't get anything in 2027. It could end up being that the second half gets spread out over 2 years.
Mhm.
I don't think we have any way of knowing. So if you want to smooth the forecast out, then you would, if you're not happy, we already voted on 2026, right?
Yeah.
You could adopt a lower growth rate for 2026, so let's say instead of getting the second half of the settlement all in 2026, you get a quarter of the settlement in 26 and a quarter in 25, then you would have lower growth rates over those 2 years.
Yeah, one way I'm looking at it is the total amount is about 4 billion, right? So if we had normal growth coming out of 2025 of 4% for a couple of years, and then take out that 4 billion, that
Yeah.
again gets you to a slightly negative number.
It is what it is. if I'm not mistaken, well, I don't know how this was. So I think that the statute says that the growth in general fund spending can't exceed the average growth rate over the 2-year period. I think that's, and like Bybar said, I don't remember a time when it has ever been binding.
Mhm. Even without these settlements though, Carl, historically, haven't we averaged somewhere in the middle of the single digits historically without, you
You
know,
mean what is
For-
income growth?
yeah, yeah. Other than, like the global recession or the COVID periods.
Yeah, I mean, this is nominal, right? So nominal income growth would be depending on the time period you're looking at, 4 or 5%. Depends on how strong inflation is.
So we've got a couple of years where we're going to be potentially artificially higher by 2%. So how do you
Right.
average that out? Yeah, I think that's what we're up against here. So when that comes back down to normal, whatever normal is, we have to account for that.
I mean, the last 20 years of personal income, I mean, we're talking about average of, I mean, it varies, right? But 3-4%, higher when inflation is higher, lower when the economy is contracting.
What was the approach during the stimulus packages that happened that, because there was stimulus ups and downs that happened for TPI back in the day. So what happened with that leveling out over time as a precedent? Because I know there was it was filling in some of the personal income from salaries, but that had to be a unique situation that this council dealt with.
Definitely.
So what was the approach with when
Good
stimulus?
question.
Yeah.
I do not remember.
And we didn't, if I remember, we didn't know exactly how things would be counted.
Mhm.
Yeah, my recollection was similar, Kurt. I think we found out about it after the fact.
Yeah.
That during
Yeah.
the numbers were final, that we found out that all the transfer pricing, transfer payments were so large that kind of skewed the number, and our forecast didn't reflect that.
So what happened was the loans to businesses, right? I can't remember what they called them.
PPP, the payroll protection.
Those, they ended up in the vast majority of cases, basically turning them into grants.
Oh, forget it. They forgave the
And
loans.
they forgave them.
Yeah.
And those ended up showing up as transfer payments. That's what I remember. And that was a complete surprise. But I don't remember how we reacted other than being very surprised.
I can say that in 22, the council's forecast was negative 1.5, and the actual came up as 2.2%. So the council was a little underestimating around that time. And
I remember at one period it was double digits or close to double digits.
That was probably general fund.
Yeah.
No, it was personal income, if my recollection. Because I always kind of track how far off we are, and we're usually not too bad, but that was one time that really stands out in my mind that it was way off, but it was because of how the monies were being counted.
From what I can see, it was basically 2020 was the, the council was under forecasting, which is expected. COVID is not there was more negative impact expected, and the reality was that negative impact didn't happen because of all the transfer payments. So that's the main thing, but nothing too huge. The council was forecasting about 2% or 0%. The reality came out to be more like 7% growth, 5% growth. So
I mean, any way you cut it, if you reduce the assumption for how much of a jump in transfer payments we'll get in 2026, and you spread it out over 2 years, you're either going to get sort of relatively normal growth in 1 year and negative in the following year, or you're going to get almost zero in 2026 and then some more normal growth in 2027.
Right.
Yeah, that's really, so I just did some calculations where I assumed we'd get half of the next spike in transfer payments in 26 and the other half in 27. And then that left me with basically no growth in 26 and then more normal growth, like 4% in 27 versus 4.5% in 26 and minus growth in 2027.
Well, we could maybe compromise a bit and have 2027 as zero growth. We'd be part of the way there anyway. And yeah, the transfer payments make such a huge difference. And we don't know for sure when they're going to come.
Yeah.
We've already voted on 26, right?
Right.
Yeah.
We kind of like take another step back and take a look at it again.
I mean, we can recall it if the majority want to recall it and revisit. Does the majority want to look at 26 again?
I mean, honestly, there is so much uncertainty here as to what is actually going to get reported. It's not clear to me that it's worth hanging our hat on any particular assumption. We know there's going to be more we're almost certain there's going to be more transfer payments coming. I think that's about all you can say. But I don't know when it's going to happen. I don't know if it's going to be 26 or 27. And so monkeying with we've already assumed that it's going to be 2026. That's as good of an assumption as any.
So what would you suggest? Let's pretend that that's what we accept and we don't go back. What would you suggest for 2027 then, Carl? As if we do assume that all the transfer payments are paid out by the end of 2026, then 2027 will not reflect any of that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we already know the answer. That suggests a small negative number for 2027. I mean, we might end up with positive number because of stronger growth. I mean, 2026 is not going to be a particularly strong economic year. The numbers so far for the first 6 months of the year for job growth are like 0.1%, 0.2%. There's basically no job growth right now, and I'm talking about our estimates of the revised data. We're already starting to work on that. They're a little bit low. They're not that much different than the preliminary data, but it's a little bit weaker. I don't think Gina would tell us this has been a very good year for tourism.
It hasn't. So we are looking at the next year, the next 18 months of more of the same. Not a lot of occupancy growth. ADR growth when we can claw it back. But you know, there was an economic impact of the Kona lows that hurt tourism for a good 2.5 months. So we don't expect that to happen again. But I'm looking at the business in the future as being more of the same of what we see now, the peaks being high, the lows being low. And, you know, I would say that it's probably the same conditions that we work in today and we have this far in the year, with occasional curveballs thrown to us with geopolitical issues.
Is the anticipation of inflation continuing at a higher pace going into 2027? So you think there'll be
higher than we'd like, but not higher than it has been. I mean, it also depends on whether you're talking national or Hawaii's inflation has, believe it or not all been due to oil, right? I mean, the shelter component of the CPI surged in the spring in a way that was not expected, and it wasn't because of owner's equivalent rent. It wasn't because of rent of primary residence. As best as we can tell, it was probably because of insurance costs that are starting to show up in the CPI data. And those are pretty big. I mean, that's a tiny component in the shelter. And I mean, our shelter inflation was running, 4 or 5%, whereas in the rest of the country, it's been coming down. And that was before, so we were seeing inflation jump in March, even before the oil price shock showed up in Hawaii. So our inflation forecast is now higher than it was a few months ago, but still coming down in the next, in 2027, 2028, not staying elevated at the, 4.5% range. I mean, when we get through the NASDAQ correction, then everything will be great, right? I don't know what. I mean, we can adopt a -1% forecast. We can adopt a 0% forecast. We're going to be wrong any way you cut it, because we don't have any information that tells us when these transfer payments are going to show up or even how big they're going to be. Right? Everything we've done so far is just educated guessing.
So what percentage has the $2 billion that's been paid in by HECO affected TPI for 26? Is it, you say it's $8 billion on an annualized basis, but what does that equate to in percentage?
It's about 2%
About 2%.
when you average it over the year, yeah,
Okay.
ish.
And historically, we've had about a 3 to 4% TPI.
Well, it's nominal, so it depends on what the inflation is. So, I mean, in an environment where inflation is 4%, you would expect TPI to be more like 6% growth. So that's sort of your other, logical way where you could end up with a positive number in 2027 is that usually when you have an inflation spike, right? The inflation spike we're dealing with right now was unanticipated. No one knew this was coming, at least not before the war started. And so that means that most employers, right, weren't offering their employees 5 and 6% wage gains going into this year. Rather, the contracted wage gains or the offered wage gains are probably more in the 3 to 4% range, which means that their employees are now losing in real terms. And typically there's a catch-up period that starts to happen, right? I mean, you can talk to large employers will look at what's happening to the inflation data when they're thinking about their wage offers. And obviously unions are looking at the inflation data when they're thinking about their their wage negotiations. So it's certainly plausible that in 2027, we could see nominal wage gains that were larger than say normal, or than in 2025 and 2026 as a catch up to the 4.5% inflation that we're probably going to see this year and 3.5% next year. See, I just gave you an out for coming up with a non-negative number for 2027. I guess my inclination would be to revisit the 2026 and adopt a lower growth, basically smooth it out. So, adopt a growth rate of something like 3% over the next 2 years.
Okay.
I think when you maybe not averaging over 2 years, but if you were to spread this out over 3 years, that might end up working out, right? I mean, there's going to be volatility and we're going to be wrong on each year, but maybe not so wrong on average.
So Mike, you still want to revisit 26?
Yeah, it's all Mike's fault.
No,
I
Mike,
would be okay with that. I would be okay
Okay.
with,
okay, then the majority will want to revisit 26.
So
let's
there
go
must
back
be a
to-
process. So I made the nomination. I guess we already voted on it, so it's no longer a
Oh, yeah, we
motion.
should have a motion. Yeah, we should have a motion. So
I'll make a motion that we revisit the 2026
okay,
forecast.
I'll second.
second, take a vote. Vice Chair Meaner,
Aye.
Dr. Bonham,
Aye.
Councilmember Hayashi,
Aye.
Councilmember Hamasu.
Aye.
Okay, and then Councilmember Villalobos, you abstained, right? So you're not gonna. Okay, so it's unanimous. We're gonna revisit 2026. Okay, so Carl, we're talking about a lower number in 26. Do you have a number you want to start discussing?
Yeah, I'm working on it. I'd say 2% in 26, 2.5. I mean, it depends on what assumptions you're making about the transfer payments. Let's say 2% each year. I guess we're doing 1 year at a time. I would motion 2% for 2026.
I'll second.
Anyone want to discuss it?
So this is a reduction from, what was the original number that we had voted on?
I
Five
think
point-
4.5.
Or now?
Was it 4.5 or 4.6?
4 point something.
Yeah. Okay. It's whatever Bibars, do you remember what we voted
That's-
on?
It was 4.6.
4.6. Okay, so we originally
So
voted
if
for
it was
4.6.
4.6, then let me redo my calculation. Actually, when I use 4.6, then yeah, I get 1.9%. And the way I'm getting that is just spreading the transfer payments out over multiple years.
And that's taking into account a slower job growth number and a relatively stable inflation number?
Well, that would be embedded in the top line 4.6 already, right? So all I'm doing is working off of that number and then adjusting when the transfer payments might be made and how much, and I spread it out over 3 years, meaning 26, 27, 28, and then I end up with a growth rate of roughly 2% each year. Because we don't know that the transfer payments will all land in 26 or in 27. When they actually get paid out is expected to take multiple years.
What is TPI supposed to be capturing when it goes in the fund or when it's spent?
Oh, not spent. No, well, it should be capturing when you earn the income, right? Which is why I thought it was quite strange that they were counting the transfer payments when the fund was funded as opposed to when households actually got the income.
Okay, so
It just strikes me as very odd.
but for our purpose, we should be looking at when it's earned, when it's paid out.
Well, we're forecasting the BEA's number, right?
Yeah.
I mean, so when UHERO did its forecast, we opted not to forecast the BEA's number. We were trying to forecast economic activity, and which means when people get the money.
Yeah.
And because if we didn't do that, then all the rest of our forecasts would be wrong, right? Because what matters is when households actually see the money in their accounts and can use it to rebuild their house or whatever. And so there's two different goals here. And we don't have we can't change our target in midstream, right? It's statute. You forecast total personal income, which by definition is what the BEA says it is.
There might be one more chance when they revise this in September.
Yeah.
So that might that might be revised down and spread
And then our growth
over.
rates will be too low.
Okay.
That's what I would expect. I don't understand how you can annualize something that isn't going to be, it's not like labor earnings where, you
can spend it. You can spend it right away.
Well, people are earning that in a relatively steady
Yeah.
form. This is a one-time shock.
And plus, it's BA is counting it when it goes in as opposed to when it's being spent. Yeah, dispersed. Okay. Any more discussions about the motion and the second motion for 2.0 for calendar year 2026? Okay, we'll take a vote. Vice Chair Maynard,
Aye.
Dr. Bonham,
Aye.
Councilmember Hayashi,
Aye.
Councilmember Hamasu.
Aye.
The vote is unanimous. 2.0 revised growth rate for calendar year 2026. Okay, calendar year 2027. Carl, you had proposed 2%.
2, 3, 4, what?
Just pick a number, huh?
I mean, the math that I did just spread the next tranche of the transfer payment out over multiple years, and because I started off with a steady growth rate of 4.6%, then when I spread it out over multiple years, I get 2% for 2027 as well.
Makes sense.
Because there's no legal requirement that they have to fund it immediately, right? I mean, I didn't see anything or hear anything about when they have to actually put the cash into the fund.
I have not seen that reported anywhere, right? But that's all we're kind of going on is, what's being reported, what the judge says, et cetera.
So based upon that, I mean, it makes sense to be somewhat conservative. Yeah, it's probably not going to be dumped in all at once. It's going to kind of trickle in over the next couple of years.
I mean, the incentives for the people funding the fund, paying into the fund, is to not fund it early, right?
Yep.
Particularly when, you can make 4.5% on a 10-year bond.
And with interest rates going up.
Or 4.5% on a 2-year note. I mean, so yeah, I mean, I don't know.
I'm comfortable with 2% for 2027. And as someone pointed out, we'll have another chance to take a look at this later in the fall.
Yeah. When do we do the next TPI forecast?
Usually end of October.
Yes, October.
In B-bars.
Yeah, and that'll be the one that would affect the spending limit for the next budget cycle. So yeah,
yeah.
that's good.
Bars, could you look into that as far as whether or not there's any legal requirements of funding and what those deadlines might be? Because then at least if we know that by the next meeting, then it'll help us determine how to spread this thing. So
Yeah, so it's the last three calendar
Parties.
years, the average of the last 3 calendar years. So the appropriations from the general fund cannot exceed the growth rate of the TPI growth average for the last 3 calendar years.
Scott,
So
were you
wait a
asking
minute. So why are we
you-
forecasting TPI if it's the last 3?
Well, for the current and next succeeding calendar year, BAA doesn't publish it. So that's where the Council on Revenues comes into play. So your forecast makes that part of that, affects that ceiling in that regard.
I
Scott,
wonder if that statute is based on old BEA reporting, because they've accelerated when they report personal income now. So does it tell you what the window is? It's the 3 years.
3 calendar years immediately preceding the fiscal year for which appropriations are to be made.
Yeah, because I mean we have 2025. So if we're okay, I think that makes sense. So really we would be using 25, 26, and 27
Yeah, I think
in the next session, I think.
that makes sense.
I think
Yeah,
Scott was asking about whether the fund
that's what I
whether
thought
the
he was
fund
asking.
was going to
the Maui Wildfire Fund.
Yeah, that's what I thought the question was.
we might have to reach out to like the AG's office or something.
Yeah, the AG, they should know, because if they can share it, because they're a party to a settlement, right? The AG has to kick in, the state has to kick in its share as well as the county and commitment schools. But if
Yeah,
it's
I can try to find out. Fibers, we
okay.
can talk about that. The goal is to figure out, does the state and KS and the county, and I think there was also another landowner on Maui that we're all supposed to pay in, and is there a time period when they're supposed to pay into the fund?
And I guess to a certain extent, we might see some indication at our next general fund meeting when Greg Goto presents, the budget. I mean, I guess the numbers, right? The forecast for their numbers, because whatever that payment should be reflected in those numbers, I would think, right, when it's going to come out. So we can always ask him then as well, as far as the state's portion, the 800 million. But yeah, Bibars, if you could just maybe see if you can find out if there is a deadline for when they have to make the contributions to the wildfire fund.
Okay.
I would think that's in the settlement agreement. I can't imagine.
I would think so too.
Yeah, I can't imagine
open-ended.
they would leave it open-ended. Okay, so do we have a motion for calendar year 2027?
I thought we did.
I thought it was motioned and seconded already.
For 27?
I'll make a motion if
okay.
it hasn't been made for 2% for 2027.
Yeah. Any second on the motion?
I'll second it.
Okay, second. Any further discussion of 2027? Okay, we'll take a vote. Vice Chair Maynard, 2% growth rate for calendar year 2027. Okay.
Aye.
Dr. Bonham?
Aye.
Councilmember Hayashi?
Aye.
Councilmember Hamasu?
Aye.
Okay, so the vote is I'm sorry, Councilmember Villalobos?
I'll abstain.
Okay, so the vote is 5 for the growth rate of 2% for calendar year 2027, 1 abstention. Okay, last item is we got to set the next general fund meeting date. Okay. So Labor Day is this year a little bit later. It's Monday, September 7th.
When is the report due?
The report is due on
Um,
the 10th to the governor,
okay.
which is a
Is that Thursday or Friday? It's Thursday, right?
Thursday.
Yeah.
Yeah. But regardless, we will not have the preliminary for August until September 9th. So it's a little too. So you might as well meet the week of September 1st, is all I have to say, like the week before the Labor Day.
Maybe at some point we should spend some time looking at the data calendar and when the preliminary reports would be available, and suggest that the statute for the council be updated so that we're not giving them forecasts 2 days before the next TPI number comes out, or there's absolutely no coordination at all right now. Maybe
Yes.
that's too ambitious.
The statutes would have to be changed, right, Carl?
Yeah. Yeah,
Is
I think so.
Is it just a statute? It's not in the Constitution.
I hope it's not in the
Yeah,
Constitution.
I know. I
It's
can't
in the
remember.
statutes, yeah, it's in the
Yeah.
HRS
Yeah.
37-111,
So the date is the 10th, September 10th.
September 10th.
So we need to meet the first week of September.
How does the,
Oh, it's the 10th. Okay. Yeah. Thursday, the
the
September 3rd.
2 o'clock?
That works for me.
Is that good for everyone?
Yep, all good.
Works for me.
Okay. Okay, so we'll meet on September 3rd at 2 p.m. Okay. And Babe Boys, when is our report, TPI report due?
This
Is it
is
August 1st?
August 5th, but
August
I'll
5th,
have
okay.
I'll have a draft ready by tomorrow.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, any other items? Anything else? Okay, thank you, everyone. And we'll see you on September the 3rd at 2 p.m.
Nice to
Babe Boys.
meet
you.
Yeah,
All
okay,
right, take
thank
care.
you.
You all.
Thank
Okay,
you.
bye. And welcome to the council.
you.
Yeah, okay.